Greetings, everyone. As I mentioned earlier, this is Jeff Fullestead with Agosto. Very excited that you're able to join us today. We have a special presentation entitled 11 Quick Ways to Optimize Your Sales Performance. I'm joined today by Caitlin Hart with Copper. As most of you know, as your G Suite or GCP partner, we'd like to run a series of webinars introducing new products or tools that we've either evaluated, deployed, or recently began working with. As I mentioned, today we're joined by Copper, who is going to present some tips, tricks, and different ways to optimize sales performance using some of the tools that they develop. Joining me today is Caitlin Hart, corporate sales at Copper. And again, this is Jeff Fullestead, the director of CSS at Agosto. A couple of important points as we begin the presentation today. It will be recorded. So for those of you who have teams that weren't able to join or team members that weren't able to join, this will be recorded and posted to agosto.com after the presentation. I'd also like to ask that folks are engaged with the conversation today. There is the ability to ask questions via the interface that we're using today. We will aggregate most of those questions and share them with the group at the end. If we see questions that are highly relevant to perhaps the slide that we're on, we'll do our best to accommodate those during the conversation. So as a quick reminder, I think most of you have worked with us. Agosto is a Tier 1 Premier G Suite and GCP partner. We help organizations solve complex problems, and I think as you'll learn today, Copper has there are some really powerful ways that we can help you solve problems related to sales and other CRM needs. So with that, I would like to turn it over to my friend Caitlin. She'll take us through the rest of the presentation. We look forward to questions, and we look forward to sharing the webinar after we conclude today. So I'll turn it to you, Caitlin.
All right, thanks so much, Jeff. I appreciate it. And thank you everyone for taking some time to join us today. Hopefully, everyone walks away with at least a nugget that is useful or new information for you. We tried to make it a little bit varied because I know our audience is also a little bit varied as well. But yes, please stay engaged and ask any questions throughout. And if we can't get to them immediately, we'll get to them at the end. Just for some background on myself, I'd like to give you a quick introduction so you know who you're talking to. My name is Caitlin. I'm in sales here at Copper. I've actually been in sales for about 12 years through various industries. I've been tech focused for the last 7. In that time, I've worked with a lot of tools. I've kind of refined a lot of processes. So that's where some of these tips come from. And kind of what drew me to Copper is actually in the last few years, I've really found some passion in the productivity and enablement space. That idea of being able to boost what your salespeople or what your people in general are doing, what they're able to produce, is really something that I relate to. I hate inefficient processes. I hate wasting time. And so that's really what brought me to Copper. So hopefully that's a little helpful for you from a contextual standpoint. Copper is a CRM in the G Suite space, and so our partnership here with Agosto makes perfect sense. But we're not here to talk about Copper. So we're really just here to talk about some ways that hopefully you can improve your sales processes internally. So I'm going to start with number 1, connect with your customer. This is one that I really relate to, and I think that as organizations coming at different growth levels, it's a really important thing to remember that your customers are actually your best resource for intel. And so, interviewing them is actually really important. You get a lot of value from that time you spend with your customer. One, from a relationship building standpoint, but 2, because they actually know everything about your sales process. They know how you sell. They can tell you why they bought. They can tell you what they liked about it and what they didn't like about it. And bonus points are that you can actually get some ROI from them. So, think about the value that you're giving them as a partner. What are those data points that, you'd like to hear about or that you'd like them to experience? A lot of your customers aren't going to know how to track this ROI out of the gate, but that's another area where you can actually prove value to them, right? Teach them how to benchmark. Teach them how to track those different ROI data points. And your QBRs are a perfect place to do that. I'm not sure if everyone does quarterly business reviews or maybe just with your big customers, but that's a great place to start and get that data from them. And it's a much easier to ask to be like, hey, that ROI was great. Do you mind if I share that on our webpage or with our customers, or maybe even a case study? Than it is to ask them, hey, is there any value that you found? And they're going to come back with things like, oh, well, we use less paper, or yeah, people seem to be happier. That's not really a data point you can run with. So there's a lot more value in taking it from a value perspective out of the gate and teaching them how to think about those things. Another great thing you can do with your customers is you can actually involve them, right? Create special user groups, bring them in for product reviews, let them look at your roadmap. They're your buyer, right? So they should know what it is that they'd like to see. And a lot of that stuff can actually be really impactful for you. Another great thing that people may overlook occasionally is that your customers are actually your greatest marketers. If you actually spend some time interviewing them and talking about their business problems, things that are important to them, that's a really great way for you to take that back to marketing and say, like, hey, this is how we need to position ourselves in the market, because this is how people are thinking about things, and this is where they think that we would be valuable to them. And then, obviously, as you build this relationship, you spend this time with them, the next natural thing that happens is that you upsell them. It's almost like a result, right? It's not what you come out of the gate necessarily telling them you want, but as you spend all this time and build this value with them, it's so much easier to get more revenue out of them and expand your partnership with them. So hopefully all of this kind of makes sense. I love customers, and I love spending time with them, which might sound funny as a salesperson, but I'm just not that person who closes a deal and shifts someone off over to the other side of the org. I really like to spend time with them. This second tip is about making your mission clear. And so when we talk about your mission, there's multiple types of missions, right? There's a particular mission of your leader, there's a particular mission of your organization, and there's a mission of your product, right? What is it that you're trying to accomplish here? Once you establish this idea of why, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Simon Sinek. He's kind of one of the big proponents of this find your why movement. And it's not to be cliche. It's really about finding something that's bigger than just revenue, and finding something that people can connect with, that can relate to. So a lot of this actually comes through in stories, which is actually something I'll touch on later in this presentation. But there are other types of whys that you can introduce. Think about why it is that you're developing a new product. Why is it that you're trying to acquire a new segment of customers? What is it that you're trying to say about those things? And if you can find a way to communicate that message, you're going to motivate your teams a lot better, and make them understand what they're working towards, as opposed to just a revenue target to work towards, right? I mean, we all like money, we all understand how it works, but intrinsically, we're just more driven by something that's bigger and more meaningful. So that's essentially what this is here. Again, it's probably something you guys have spent time thinking about or listening to, because it's very topical right now. The third thing is to think like your prospect, right? This here is kind of a discovery call checklist. Probably most of you adopt something like this in your organizations today. But at the root of it, we're basically trying to understand what's important to this person. What industry are they in? What are the typical industry challenges that they face? How are they making revenue? Who is it you're speaking with? Are you speaking with someone who's in operations? Are you speaking to someone who's running IT? The difference in what their viewpoint is what you're going to want to really, I guess, personalize in your messaging to them as you go through this discovery process with them. And their problems, their priorities are always different. And so these are pretty basic things, but sometimes we kind of overlook the basic things. So it's a good time to review some of these items. The real takeaways here are that your customers really want to purchase a product that they feel will help their business. So you can't sell them that without understanding their business problems. Whenever I talk to a prospect, I really do just want to understand what it is that's important to them. And it doesn't even have to be related to what I'm selling them, right? We can talk about what their business priorities are, and maybe there's a way for me to relate to that. Maybe there's not, but until I understand what those business problems are, we could waste a lot of time, or we could be selling the wrong thing or the wrong angle to them, right? So really keeping it value focused is super important. And then another thing that I really advocate here to the salespeople that I work with is that positioning yourself as an advisor is a lot more effective than being a salesman. No one wants to be sold to. I don't like to be sold to. I don't like to go in the Apple store and have people shove random accessories at me. I would rather, have a conversation with someone, understand their business, and then work towards solving that problem together. And then maybe along the line, because I've worked in so many various industries, I can actually be useful to them and provide some tips or some ideas on how they can actually improve their business separate of even purchasing what it is I'm selling. So that advisory relationship is really effective. The next thing is one of my all-time favorites is tell a story or several. People really connect through storytelling. And you'll see here on the right, I have a book, maybe some of you have even read it. It's called Sapiens. It's a brief history of humankind, but a lot of the first part of his book is actually based on how this idea of storytelling has actually evolved humankind and what we do and how we think over time. And so this idea that we think in stories and we make sense of the world through telling stories actually really does make sense to me. So, a lot of the stories that we tell in our sales process kind of goes back to that why. They really can sometimes be the same thing. I tell people, why our CEO started Copper, for instance. That's a story I tell. When you think about someone being frustrated with something and someone facing a problem as a business owner themselves in the market, and then coming up with an idea and then seeing that there's no solution in the market currently like it, and then coming here and creating a new company to solve that problem, it's a lot more powerful than saying, yeah, he just wanted to create a CRM company, right? It doesn't really resonate as much when you drop it as a factoid as opposed to telling it as a story. I apply these stories to what I call customer stories or customer wins, as some people define them. Talking about why a customer who's like the person you're speaking to purchased what you're selling, or why it is that a competitor may not be as advantageous of a solution as you are. If you tell it in a story, it's less alarming, it's less offensive. And I'm also a big, advocate against any type of competitive shaming. So this is a much classier way to talk about a competitor, but without being, I guess, a mudslinger. So the art of storytelling really can be applied to so many different facets, and not just of your business, but also of how you communicate to your people and how, as leaders, you communicate, right? It's something you really adopt in all areas. Another thing that I really love to do is practice give-gets. I think that in sales especially, we always think that we're just here to give, and then at the end, when it's time to maybe close a deal, if you haven't lost complete control of the sales cycle by the time you get there, and the customer gets so used to the fact that you just give whatever they ask that you can imagine that leads to a lot of discounting or a lot of bad deals. And another thing is that it really just kicks off the relationship in a really strange dynamic. It's very hard to have a partnership with someone, which is what you really need to have a successful customer. You need a partnership because things aren't always going to go perfectly. You want them to, but we live in a world where there's humans and there's errors, right? And it may not be always on your side, it could be on the customer side. But without that partnership, it's very hard to work through these problems, right? And so at the very beginning, usually from the first call, I start practicing give-gets. And it's, you might ask for something and I might ask for something in return. It's very simple. And as you kind of go through the sales cycle with your prospect, that dynamic actually brings respect to your relationship, because someone's not going to just try to, railroad you into giving them something exactly that they want. They understand that you're in a partnership. And so I'm happy to try and come to that solution. Sometimes it's pricing. Sometimes it's even like a marketing clause. We want to be able to try and work through all these things with our customers, but it is going to take some sort of return on their side as well, right? We have numbers we have to hit. We have, minimum or maximum discounting rules. I have a legal team that I have to go and appease. So I can't give someone everything they want. It's not even possible. So kind of working this dynamic of give gets really, really helps in creating equilibrium. Gauging their seriousness too is another really good thing. And also it really cuts down on problems that people see, like discounting or too many reference calls on their customers or too many pulls on legal resources, those types of things. Your sales team can really own a lot of that stuff. And this is something that we could really spend an hour on just this topic alone. But hopefully this is a good kind of snippet for you. Another thing is, giving your team credit. Super important, this is my favorite tagline. If any of you connect with me on LinkedIn, you'll see this is my headline. Teamwork makes the dream work. It sounds cheesy, but it is something I really believe in. And the data actually backs it up. When you actually share credit or actually give other people around you the credit as opposed to hogging the credit for yourself, the dynamics actually change dramatically in your organization from a, an effectiveness rating, as well as other things like, retention. Think about how expensive it is to find somebody, bring them in, train them. You don't want them to feel belittled or like they're not a part of something, especially when they were, right? So giving them credit and also allowing them to kind of be in a position of powerfulness, I guess it really is empowering for them to do that. Instead of lowering them down and boosting them up, you'll get a lot more out of them because they'll feel confident and they'll be happier. It also helps with, encouraging their future success in the company as well. So these are some kind of basic things here, but hopefully it makes sense that, when we share credit or we give credit to others, it's a much more effective strategy in terms of morale and retention and happiness in the organization than it is to have that one moment of glory in the spotlight to yourself. Another item that kind of sometimes loses priority as we go through our day-to-day is coaching. And so it's really important to remember to prioritize that within your organizations. And coaching doesn't have to be, that training that's run, once a quarter, maybe once a year. A lot of organizations do sales kickoffs, and that's kind of their only time they do any type of training. Well, that's just not effective because that training that's 1, 2, 3 days, maybe in Vegas, maybe they're hungover, like the retention is pretty low. And I say this as somebody who, spent the last few years in sales enablement. This is one of the biggest problems that organizations come to us with. And it was, how do we actually take what we're teaching them during their sales kickoffs, one time a year and make it last throughout the year? And the answer is simple, it's coaching. Your managers are with them every day. And yes, they might be there, on calls with them, but it's very reactive. There needs to be some proactive elements to coaching. There needs to be career coaching. There needs to be, business acumen coaching. There's all types of different coaching, and it doesn't just have to be about what you did on that one sales call that your manager just listened to. It's also really helpful if you can break things into bite-sized pieces. People, especially nowadays, we can barely watch a 2-minute cat video. You think that we can sit in a 2-hour training and remember everything. Unfortunately, you're wrong. So as much as you can, breaking that coaching and that content into small chunks, if you can do something in 15-minute increments, maybe you pull your team off the floor, once a week, you do a group coaching and you reinforce those elements that you want them to take away from that over and over and over again, because practice does make perfect. Another great thing in organizations to kind of, jazz up your coaching is to bring in guest speakers. It can be people from other departments in your organization. It can also be people from outside. Everyone has networks here. Everyone knows somebody. Bring in a fresh face, and that will really kind of drive the awareness and attention span of your team to absorb what that person's there to deliver. It's also really important to listen to individual needs. So when we think about each person, everyone is a little bit different, and that's a great thing. But it means that you can't just teach to one person, right? The type A person might learn something a certain way, but there might be someone who's a little bit, less attention focused, and they're not going to speak up, right? Because we're in a big conference room. They get overtaken by their more bold colleagues, and then they kind of miss that value that they were there to get. So the best way to do this is to create different coaching and training programs that actually relate to different personalities. And so, there's the passive people, there's the active people. Those are kind of the two main groups, but you can even break it down a little bit more than that. You can have role play, you can have more of an observation or absorption method. Not everyone likes role playing. And then as a value, you get a lot more attention from them. And you manage to actually get your message across, as opposed to trying to put a square peg in a round hole. No one wants to do that. But it also really makes that person feel recognized and important. And the best way to find out is to ask someone, and not in a judgy way or not in a rude way, right? But ask them, like, what's the best way that I can coach to you? What's the best way that you learn something? Or give me an example of a time you were in a training and you learned something that you hadn't have learned before. Like, what scenario were you in? What was the atmosphere? How did you learn that? Ask questions, right? And be curious. That's the best way to understand these things. Number 9 is kind of more about tooling. There's all kinds of tools in the marketplace. Sometimes we buy too many of them, but they are important and they're necessary to measure our business. So it's important to make sure that we implement the correct tools. These tools should really be able to tell a story about the business. And so, again, kind of going back to my sales enablement past, some of the KPIs that people came to calls to solve were their win rates, their competitive win rates, the average deal size, average time to close, average ramp time, conversion rates, pipeline obviously is important, their forecasting, overall revenue. A lot of people cannot actually track these things, or they are not currently tracking them. And that's a very, very sad thing, as somebody who's a total nerd about this. Because when you look at something like, let's just look at conversion rates. To a lot of people, conversion rates only is really precedent at the marketing level, but throughout the sales process, we're actually converting our customers through the pipeline. So if you look at a conversion rate from a stage 2 to a stage 3, most sales cycles are about 5 stages. It tells a story. When we see that you lose deals at stage 2 to 3, we might say, oh, well, you were speaking to the wrong person. When you lose a deal at stage 4, which is what we consider close to close, you're at the proposal phase, you've already put money in there, you put a lot of resources and time, and you lose a deal at that stage, it tells a completely different story. So it's important for us to have that data, or else we can't actually make changes to our business to improve those items. So hopefully most of you guys already have this on lockdown, but you'd be very surprised how many people don't. But obviously I think we all know why these are important, right? Because we make better decisions when we know the whole picture. Another thing that is really important is specializing your sales team. Again, something that's probably pretty prevalent for your organizations already today. But when you think about how your org is structured, the type of sale you're closing, you're going to have to break out resources appropriately. For somebody who's in kind of a high frequency sales cycle, you're not going to have as many of these areas. But for people who have more complex sales cycles, you have to adapt your sales team and your sales process to match that. So, LDRs is kind of a newer thing. They're lead development reps, or some people call them research developers. And essentially, they do the worst part of the whole process, which is just getting data and intel cleaned up. They're data scrubbers. They're the cheapest of all of them for obvious reasons. And then, maybe then they go to an SDR, or maybe you don't have an LDR. A lot of organizations don't. There's just maybe a SDR, BDR, or ISR, which is an inside sales rep. Everyone kind of defines them a little bit differently. The SDR, BDR is really the appointment setters. Most organizations consider an SDR an inbound person, so they're taking outside inquiries and just fielding those responses. A BDR, which is a business development rep, is more of a outside salesperson in a way, or what we consider someone who does more research or outbound activities. So they might do a little bit more work in targeting who it is that they're reaching out to. They might do more outreach that takes a lot longer. The inbound people are going to be pretty quick. They're going to have to cycle through, maybe 60 calls a day. The outbound people, they might just be looking to connect with 10, 20 people a day. So much different motion there and much different skill set. How this works out really well, though, is that as they progress through the sales org, it's a natural promotion rate, right? So you're taking these people from college, you're teaching them little bits of skills at a time, giving them about a year in each role to perfect that part of the process, and then promoting them up into your different sales roles. And they'll be much more equipped, to actually be an effective seller because they know your market, they know how to talk to that buyer's problems, and now they have to learn how to sell, right? When we looked at AEs, most of these people are segmented out by company sizes they're working with, sometimes with industry. That's pretty simple. The resources that they need to have in a more complex, especially as they go up market and they sell larger deals, the resources become a little bit heavier. It really is team selling. And so, product marketing actually comes into a lot of calls to talk about roadmap or vision. You get a lot of sales engineers or solution consultants to help you craft that custom vision of your product for that customer. And then you have to bring in legal and security people as well. So it's important to think about all the resourcing that you need to be able to achieve the types of deals you want to close, and make sure that your org is equipped for that. It really allows for better focus, better prioritization, more speed, and an ability to close bigger deals faster, which is what everyone wants, or maybe it's just me. The last one I'm going to leave you with is thinking outside the box. And so when we look at the market, a lot of times we get really, really infatuated with what our competitors are doing and how do we do that. That's the wrong thing to do because that's like a dog chasing its tail. You started your company on your own. You know what it is that you want. You've connected with your customers hopefully by now because you're on step 11, and you want to take a different approach than everyone else. So how can you differentiate? Maybe it's in your marketing messaging. Maybe it's in the value offerings that you have. Maybe it's actually just in building that relationship with your customer. One of the interesting things is that, throughout my sales career, one of the things I've learned is actually the sales process you run can be the differentiation that's enough to win you the deal. I can't tell you how many times, because you can probably tell, I run a pretty rigorous sales process. And at the end of, coming to terms and closing that deal, the amount of times I've had someone tell me, well, I want my team to sell like yours is actually a lot. And it's not, to blow up my ego, although it does, I will say, I feel pretty good about that. It's really a testament to a way that you can differentiate that doesn't cost any money, right? It might cost some time and some resources, and you may not be able to be lazy, but it really is enough to win a deal sometimes. There are some other cool things you can do. This idea of finding different ways to build a relationship with someone, that's really cool. There are some ideas like, sending out different marketing materials. Maybe it's very targeted. Maybe you've had a conversation with this person, you've had a discovery call with them, you understand at a basic, their business needs, and you think there's a fit there, but you also found out they like fishing. So maybe you send them something really personalized that relates to fishing. Or, maybe, you heard that they're going to Nashville and you were just in Nashville, you found a really cool restaurant while you were there. Maybe you shoot over that restaurant recommendation. That's not something that most of your competitors are doing, and that's a good thing because it allows you to do it and look special. So again, this is something we could talk about for hours because there's so many different angles, but hopefully this is a good nugget for you to kind of walk away with. That brings us to kind of the end. Hopefully this was a pretty good list to go through, and it was varied enough, but I would really love to hear some of your questions. So I guess we could open it up to Q&A now.
That's great. Caitlin, this is Jeff, and I'm, as I said, moderating some of the questions that we're getting. So have you seen organizations, excuse me, in certain industries or of a certain size have the most success with copper?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think that, some of the industries we've seen really good success with is the industries that have that more complex sale. There is some, velocity sales customers we have, but that complex sale actually really works well for copper because we're so focused on the relationship aspects. We can track that data really easily, especially because that connectivity to G Suite, the interactions, the relationship strength, the relationship mapping actually works really well with copper.
That's a good one. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I know that this has been really, really helpful, Caitlin. I know we haven't gotten into the technical components for myriad reasons, right? I think this has been useful. If folks do want to learn more about, and I'm paraphrasing here, the way this integrates with G Suite or other tools that they use, what's the best way to learn more about those integrations, like with Mail or Google Calendar, for example?
Yeah, there's a lot of great information on our website. I'm happy to help field those integration questions as well. We have, a fair amount of native integrations. We also have an open API, so our system is very flexible in connecting to the different systems. But probably best to kind of talk through what integrations you're looking at, and I can make the right recommendations.
Excellent. And so that I would assume that it's safe to say, yeah, some of your engineering folks, if any of our the people joining us today wanted to see a demonstration or talk through some of those technical components, we should be able to help. Right?
Of course, absolutely.
Excellent. Yeah, there are a few questions along those lines. So I don't see a lot more, but maybe Caitlin, because you've been doing this for a while, are there some other common questions sales organizations or sales leaders have about using Copper, or kind of any tips about getting started?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people ask, about our value prop. And so the biggest value prop that we see is really an engagement and adoption. And so when a lot of people, especially now, I mean, the way that we've purchased software has evolved so much. If you go back to like the NetSuite days, things were a lot different, right? You were selling to a single buyer. They bought it for the organization. Today, we don't sell to a single buyer. We sell on average to a buying group of 7 people. And so everyone has different needs. But even more than that, they want their people to actually use it. And, that's totally sensible, right? Because it's an investment. And, we don't want to sell shelfware. So adoption is actually the biggest piece that kind of comes up as a value proposition. Most CRMs, they see an average adoption rate weekly of 15%. That's 1-5. Copper actually sees a daily adoption rate of 86%. So right out of the gate, you're getting that increased, return on your investment. But it also means that as a result of people using the CRM more, you get an increase in your actual data points and your insights into your business, right? Because what are they putting into the CRM? Their relationships, their deals, the different processes throughout the organization. And so if that stuff is accurate and being adopted, you have better business insights.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, so I think one of the other questions here, sorry, I'm scrolling through to kind of eliminate duplicates, but this is an interesting one, kind of open-ended, but what types of processes do you see people commonly optimizing, or what types of processes are you trying to optimize was actually the question. I'm not sure who.
Yeah, that's a great question. So when we look at, the kind of whole go-to-market journey, it starts in marketing. So there's a lot of areas for us to optimize. It might be, getting that lead into a system faster and getting it a touch quicker, right? That's one area of optimization at the front of the funnel. It might be, not losing track of your prospects who are warm, right? We have different levels of prospects. We have prospects who say, nope, never going to change our CRM. Good luck with your life. And we have, people who say, actually, this is interesting. We just signed a contract. Those are warm people, right? But how do we differentiate those people, and how do we get a hold of those people and track them is really important. So that might be an area for optimization. As you go through the funnel, you can imagine those data points continue to kind of come out. But in the sales cycle, it's simple stuff like, have you not spoken to someone you have an active deal with in over 14 days? Keeping track of that activity and that data, super important again for your opportunity to close and win that business. So really the touches, and they go all the way through customer success, professional services, pre-sales. Those are all organizations that adopt Copper, maybe more for a project kind of identified purpose. Like if you think about a deployment with your customer, how you track that, how you take them through those same stages. That's also something that we can help optimize.
Oh, I was muted. Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay.
Your experience, Caitlin, again, I'll avoid us taking us down too technical of a path, but What is, do you have a sense, do most organizations, from evaluation to deployment, I know CRM tools can be, it can take time to stand them up. And I know that you're cloud-based. What do you think, if you were taking a guess at it, are clients taking 90 days to deploy Copper? Does this happen faster, slower? I know there's so many variables there, but can you give us just a broad sense of timelines if an organization decides to go this direction?
That's a really great question. And so actually time to value is another one of our big value props. We are cloud-based, and actually that connectivity with G Suite gives us a really great head start, because we're already going to consume the emails and activities that you have with that customer from your inbox. And so that gets you a really good, head start in your CRM that helps shorten that implementation time. I would say on average, depending on the complexity and also depending on your team resourcing. Typically, if you have a project manager and you have a very complex implementation, that project manager is able to help meet deadlines on your side, and we have someone on our side who can help meet those same deadlines. We can even manage a complex implementation in 3 months. Wow. If you don't have that resource, it could take a little bit longer, but that's probably the biggest differentiator in timelines is, do you have the resources or not? And do you have somebody who, even if you have some resources, do you have somebody who can actually manage and own that project?
Well, that's really good. Yeah, it's a common question. And I know that your team has worked with our technical team. So again, for the folks joining us today, this is something we have experience assisting with. So yeah, thank you, Caitlin. So I think I've moved through the questions that our audience had. I'm not sure if you have any parting thoughts or helpful tips and tricks. We did share some contact information in the presentation about starting a trial or a demo. Any other final thoughts, Caitlin?
No, I think that's really it. Hopefully this was helpful. I would love to connect with those people who are on the call today. I really appreciate the time. I know that everyone's busy, but please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I love making new friends. I can talk a lot, as you just heard here. So maybe you can talk back sometime and we can have a conversation.
Well, that's so helpful. Caitlin, I really appreciate the time and the time that your team took to help us put this together. Again, for the audience, in the presentation, you'll see a link about starting a trial or setting up a demo. That's a pretty unobtrusive, lightweight way to get started. As previously mentioned, we do work, we, meaning Agosto, work very closely with Copper. So we do have technical resources who are very comfortable with kind of what it takes to get started as well. So you'll see in that last slide, you can reach out to us, of course, info@agosto.com as always, and we'll fast respond with some time and some information to help you evaluate this. As Caitlin pointed out, her contact information is there as well, khart@copper.com. Make friends with her on LinkedIn, as I've done, and she'd be happy to help us. So yeah, unless the group has additional questions, as I led off with, this presentation is available online. We're very excited to see what additional questions folks have. I know sometimes we get a little shy in these presentations, and we look forward to stepping you through how Copper can help optimize sales performance and probably a lot of other processes that your organization uses. But I really appreciate the time this morning or this afternoon, Caitlin. It's been very helpful.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate your time too.
Yeah. Take care, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We'll be in touch soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye.